Yes, that is right. Will Schofield, Mark Reddings coming to you from the Shelter FootyCast, BackChat Studios, and I sound like I might have had a big weekend, Skeeter. How are you, mate?
Hello, Scully. Good to be here. And yeah, you remind me a little bit of William H. Macy from Shameless, the character who had a bit of a time staying sober over a long period of time. But yours was a short, sharp, Saturday, Sunday sort of double header. But no, I had a decent weekend myself, culminating in the Super Bowl today. But of course, we both did the UFC. We both had a bit of sport and a bit of music on the agenda.
So this is a bit of a later recording for us, and first time we've done this, we're double Zencastering. So I'm in the BackChat Studios. Skeeter is at his beautiful mansion, wherever he lives, sitting at home, and we're going to come to you with a bit of technology. So it's amazing that Mark's here, actually, but luckily both his daughters were on hand to help. A bit of a shout out to Georgia, especially. You can follow us on socials. Remember, Shelter FootyCast on Instagram. Send us an email, footycast@shelterbrewing.com.au. Just a reminder that this Shelter FootyCast will be on its own feed today. So you'll be listening, no doubt, on the BackChat feed right now. If you go onto wherever you listen to your podcast, you search Shelter FootyCast. Just click on that, subscribe to that. It'll be posted on BackChat and the Shelter FootyCast feed for the next month or so we don't miss anyone out. But it's just a reminder that there will come a time where it's no longer posted here on BackChat. And yes, Skeet, I do realise that's gone straight over your head, mate, but I'm going to keep reminding people so we don't miss it. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, I've got no idea what you're talking about, so let's just push on. And we start with the biggest event today, which was the Super Bowl. You and I both watched it. I backed the wrong horse in Philadelphia. They led for most of the game, but a bloke called Patrick Mahomes just got the job done when class was required. He was just too good.
Yeah, he was, mate. And you backed the wrong horse. I backed the right horse. A little bit of a shout out to BackChat. We jumped on with our Blue Bet multi for the first one of the year, and we bloody got it up, Skeeter. $5.50, Mahomes MVP, into Travis Kelce scoring a touchdown, into over points, into the win from Kansas City, and we got it up, Skeeter. So it was bloody good to watch. I will go into a little bit why, we both watched the Super Bowl, which is great, but I was at Red Hot Chili Peppers last night, which is why my voice sounds like this. And before that, it was the UFC. So that's what I did this weekend, Skeeter. I'll come back to the UFC because this is a sport podcast, and I'll just tease it with it. It was the most incredible sporting event I've ever been to, Skeeter. Okay, so I'll fill you in a little bit more about that. Yep, absolutely. But Red Hot Chili Peppers were in fine form last night as well, supported by Post Malone. I was just going to wonder if you know any Post Malone songs, Skeeter.
No, but I do know that the great man struggled to get into a rooftop bar last night in the city because of his tattoos. So he might be popular in some parts, but obviously security guards at the QT building had no idea who the hell he was.
Just back on the Super Bowl, Aaron Sipos, who of course is an Australian who was playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a punter. He was on St Kilda's list back in the day. He had his first punt went for 57 yards, which is a really good punt for a punter. But he had a moment I think he'll probably like to forget in the last quarter. He was punting, didn't go far, went about 35 yards, and then it was the longest return from a punt in Super Bowl history off one of his punts, Skeet. So unfortunately for the young Australian, they went on to lose the game as well.
Yeah, and I guess when you look at what a punter does during the course of a game, there are little moments, and they're only involved, as you know, sparingly in some cases. You're right, 57 yards to get his Super Bowl off and running was outstanding. But I look back and I must admit, I was sitting at the shoe, so I didn't have a close eye on what type of punt he went for. Sometimes, of course, they now use the drop punt, these kickers from Australia. Did he go for the drop punt or was it the torpedo? I found it hard to pick up. Either way, it's very shallow. And look, the chasers weren't all that effective either, but I suppose a lot of people zeroing in on Sipos not able to get some more height and some more yardage on that kick.
Yeah, that's right. There were some other big things that happened during the week that we haven't had a chance to speak about, Skeeter. The cricket, the one that we've all been waiting for, Australia v India, and it was an absolute stinker. I've heard embarrassment thrown around. I mean, you're probably more the cricketing man than I am. Talk me through it. What happened?
Look, let me just preface this by saying that some very good Australian teams have gone over to India and struggled big time. So this won't be the first or last time. The conditions are so foreign to many of the Australians, particularly facing spin on a deck that turn. But we don't have too many excuses because we won the toss, we batted first, We didn't make enough in the first innings, 177. And of course, India, Rohit Sharma was outstanding up against a bowling attack, spin-wise, that was inexperienced apart from Nathan Lyon. And Lyon was largely ineffective compared to Todd Murphy, who picked up 7 for on debut, which is terrific. I remind you of Jason Frazier, who had a really good breakout test match in India. But we didn't score enough, we didn't bowl well enough, and our second innings of 91, yeah, there's lots of reasons behind it. And I guess the curious thing from my point of view is that they've now seconded Matthew Coonan, who's a off spinner from Queensland, to go across and join the Test squad, which makes you wonder, after one Test, they left Travis Head out, and there's speculation he might come in and take David Warner's spot in the next Test match. Of course, David is averaging something like 20 in India, so there's pressure on him. In fact, none of the batters, apart from Labuschagne and Smith, look anywhere near comfortable against the spin. So there's going to be some changes. Cam Green, if he's fit, comes into the mix. So too Mitch Starc. But more so than that, Scully, I think it's the mental disintegration, the collapse in that second innings, and what that's going to do with the short turnaround heading into the second Test is my concern for Australia, is that whether we can compete moving forward. And don't put this beyond the Australians to go down 3 or 4-0, because that is the difference on those pitches from what I saw over there in Nagpur.
There was a lot of talk about the omission of Travis Head, who is the highest ranked batter in the world at the moment. Come off averaging whatever he averaged in the Ashes series here. Sorry, not Ashes, but the series over summer. Like, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you leave the best batter out, no matter what he's averaging. If he's in form, isn't he? I mean, if you're going to be leaving people out because of how they bat on certain wickets, you'd be making more changes than they ever do. So that had me scratching my head just from a team mentality point of view. You imagine playing the best cricket in your life, or doing the best thing you've ever done in your job at the highest level. You can't do it any better, and then you still get dropped. I'm not a fan of that in any way. I don't care where they're playing. They could be playing down at Manjimup Swamp for all I care. It's a shocking look, I reckon. And I don't know if the coach has got a real hiding over it because of the way Australia batted. Like, Travis Head wouldn't have made much of a difference. Well, I just think it speaks to the mentality more than anything else. Didn't like it at all, Skeeter. As you can hear, I'm not happy about it, mate. But that's okay. We're going to move on from cricket. Todd Murphy, 7 for 124 as well, as you mentioned, which was outstanding. Now, Skeeter, the UFC. I sort of touched on it on Thursday. Told you I was going to the event over the weekend. Did you say you were a fan? You're not really a fan of it, are you?
No, well, I'm a bit like you with cricket. You tiptoe around it, and in fact, you know more about cricket than I know about UFC, to be honest. And I went there with a bit of an open mind just to see what it was like, and the atmosphere, and the fighters. And I sat next to a young bloke that knew a fair bit about the rules, which, let's be honest, a lot of people not au fait with the nuances of UFC and the fighting. And it was educational. I did enjoy it. What I did notice, I thought the atmosphere in RAC Arena. You say you go to a Wildcats game, it made it look like we were at church when you go to watch the Wildcats. It was buzzing, it was electric, and for the main bout, Alexander Volkanovski came out with men at work. It was electric. It was amazing to sit there and just take it in. And look, you're going to have critics as to whether it is a legitimate sport, whether it's brutal, whether it's endangers people's health, etc. Whatever you want. As a spectacle, I was pleasantly surprised. It was a great few hours.
Yeah, well, look, I've got a few points to make. So I don't think there's any other sport in the world, now you can correct me on this, Skeeter, where you could get a captivated audience, an engaged audience like we saw at RAC Arena for 8 hours. I was there at 6:30 a.m. It was half full then, and then within an hour it was capacity at 7:30 in the morning. The last fight was at 1 o'clock or 1. No, 2. Like, I didn't walk out till 2:30. So, is there any other sport? Cricket, maybe, right? I just think everyone in their seats. At stages, there was silence through the crowd, and it was a pretty rowdy crowd, Skeeter. But if at stages there was complete silence of just how intense people were watching it, and then there was moments of just absolute debauchery in the crowd when, Alex Volkanovski in the last 30 seconds, it's in a title fight, and he's on top of his opponent. But people next to me and around me, I'd never seen that sort of passion before. Like, people at the footy, they get excited and they love their teams and they have big moments. But people were screaming for blood, like bloodlust,
It
for
was
yeah, for like 2 hours.
It was like, and in the crowd, of course, we had about six blokes in front of us started shouting out, "Islam's a wanker." And I thought, look at these knuckleheads. Within 30 seconds, 15,000 people, you would have heard it. They started chanting this, like the old days, Hadley's. They were engaged. I agree with it. It was extraordinary to see that the passion they had. And I'd just like your opinion, because before I want to talk about Jack Della Maddalena and what he did, the young bloke who went to Aquinas College and 26 years of age, and what a story his was to win inside one round. I thought that the Russian, Islam, deserved to win. I thought he won more rounds than Volkanovski. There's been plenty of debate on Twitter about that. You're the expert. Tell me, was it a close decision, or do you think the visitor got the job done?
I think the crowd and the atmosphere swayed me towards Alexander Volkanovski, but I think I've spoken to people that know it even better than me, and said that Islam probably won the fight. And that's where it is an interesting sport, where there's a lot of technicalities, and there's lots of different ways that people go about it and the way they score points. And it probably was an Islam fight, but Alex Volkanovski has called for a rematch. So I know people don't tune into this to hear about the breakdown of UFC, but I just wanted to speak about that as a sporting moment. And I was lucky enough to spend quite a lot of time working on it during the week with Fox Sports and KO, and met a lot of the UFC corporate side from over in London. And they said they will be back in Perth before 12 months. They will be back in the next 12 months, already confirmed. Maybe not released publicly, but you've heard it here now on the Shoulder FootyCast, Skeeter.
Yeah, and listen, I sat with a guy who had a lot to do with bringing the event to Perth, and just some numbers. I don't think these are secret, but 15,000 there on Sunday, 9,000 of whom had come from interstate. That's a massive proportion of the crowd there. There was $6 million in ticket sales. Apparently, if the same event was held in Nevada with the same crowd, etc., they'd make $10 million. The reason being, I'm told that the Americans have almost a bidding system for seats. So if you want to pay more than the $5,000, which were the front row seats at RAC Arena, you could pay $10,000. So hence, it's a more profitable way of UFC making money. But the dollars were huge. The audience in excess of 200 million. I'm not sure if this is even debatable now, but surely UFC has overtaken boxing in terms of a worldwide
Yeah.
sport.
Oh, absolutely. And it's the fastest growing sport in the world across a lot of metrics. And probably Basil Zemplis and the West Australian government, alongside him, would be looking at it, and what a spectacle for Perth. I think overall, getting events like that, and then into Red Hot Chili Peppers and Post Malone, and, you're at Sting, and there's been events, and liking what Perth and the WA community are doing with their events at the moment. So very positive. Let's move into the AFL, Skeeter. The Fremantle Dockers, a little bit going on down there, of course, last week. Nat Fyfe steps down as a captain, and we went through that last week. Over the weekend, I've seen a couple of interviews he's done. I think he sat down with Ben Cameron, which was a really insightful chat at the ABC. Also, saw something with Mark Duffield on Code Sports, speaking about the real mental anguish. And I got a little bit out of that with him when I spoke to him, but sort of speaking about, he used the word depression and anxiety, and being in a real low place with not only the captaincy, but some of the injuries he's had over the past few years. I think he's always been this open, but it's been pretty cool over the last week to see some real insight into one of the best players that the AFL's got.
Yeah, and it begs the question, once he finishes his career, what he wants to do. We know he's very well spoken, he's articulate, he's intelligent. The media career is there for the taking. I suppose to counter that is, if he's a player who's won 2 Brownlow medals, has gone through those bouts of depression or low times in his life, what does it say then for all those other footballers? And you probably could answer this really well. The setbacks, unable to break into the side, people questioning whether you have the desire or whether you're good enough to make that level. And yet Nat Fyfe, one of the best we've seen in WA, again, that mental health doesn't revolve around whether you're getting a kick on a weekend. But I found that really fascinating that he has admitted openly that he struggled with those moments. And you would have thought, given his ability to overcome injuries and perform at the highest level, that that would be an area that he wouldn't be affected by.
Yeah, I think performing at the highest level is what brings the mental stress on. Though, to be honest, whether it's football now football's a public industry, and that's what makes these points talking points. But the exciting thing, and or maybe not exciting, but excuse me, the positive thing about it being public is these conversations get had, because I really don't think playing football is anything different to being in the media or to being an accountant or being a father or being a mother. And it does not just men, it's everybody. And the fact that it's public means the conversations get had, but it doesn't differentiate whether you're a bad player, you're a local footballer, you're a state footballer, you're the best player in the league. Things get hard sometimes. So, um, I look at it a really positive way that he's able to speak about it, and potentially these conversations like you and I are having, or articles that get read, helps people understand that you know people go through hard things in life, and it's not just footy players, but um, being able to talk about it, and being able to speak to people about how you're feeling, and when it does get tough, reach out to people or whatever helps you get through things. Mate, you can speak to it as well. I really don't think it's a football only thing, but the public nature, gives it that voice, which is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've summed it up pretty well this guy. One, it's not really a huge issue in footy, but maybe it is for the WA clubs. And they're going to charter flights to go across and play on the East Coast. And fans can go along. West Coast, Fremantle, we believe. Certainly West Coast are jumping right on board that. And Paul Ramsey, the team at Travel and Sport, I think are going to be involved with that. But how much of a difference will it make not to have to catch the commercial flight at the times they want? Just from a recovery point of view, is it a 1% or is it just an interesting talking point? Did it ever bother you having to catch a later flight or an earlier flight? Does that make a difference to the team's preparation?
I think some of these things, when you don't know what the other side looks like, it's hard to tell, right? Like, it was always like, well, imagine if we didn't have to travel every second week. But because we never did that, we just never knew any better. So, in terms of the plane and plane times, well, they've never really been able to choose when they fly. So, I don't know how much they'll change. I mean, we would always fly out sort of mid morning, 2 days out from the game. That won't change. They won't be, you can't leave any later because you get in too late into interstate. And you wouldn't want to leave any earlier because then you're stuffing around in the morning. So they'll still be leaving exactly the same time. Um, Getting out of games, I mean, it was always West Coast policy to get out as soon as they could. And realistically, I can't remember too many times I'm sitting around the airport for any longer than 45 minutes to an hour waiting for a flight. It's a good time to debrief, and the coaches always used to get on the clip. So they're still going to have to fly.
Mm.
I was speaking to someone the other day about, the public interaction on planes. Quite honestly, there's such a big party of West Coast people that travel. There's the 23 players that travel. There's another 15 coaches minimum, and then support staff. There's usually a traveling party of 50 to 60 people. So if you think about that on a plane, you're going back 10 to 15 rows just West Coast. So you very really have very much interaction with the public on the planes anyway. So to answer your question, a long-winded answer, I think it will have little to no difference to what each team does on a travel sense.
Geez, I'm glad I brought that up, Scully. But no, it's just interesting because people are always talking about the travel and whether it's detrimental or how difficult it is. One question is, how long before Jack Darling can travel? Because
Yeah.
if it's a syndesmosis injury with him, and we've seen the vision of him at training, and a lot of Eagle supporters are now thinking, well, is this just the start of another year of setbacks? And Jack's obviously with Josh Kennedy's retirement, he becomes so important to that structure of the forward line.
So important to the structure of the forward line. Like, without a Jack Darling, not saying that the best defender won't already be going to Oscar Allen, but, certainly with no Darling, they 100% will be. And it just leaves less avenues to goal for the West Coast Eagles. Now, they'll have a young guy step up and jump in his place if, in fact, it is a syndesmosis, which, syndesmosis injuries are not, hitting the panic alarm, but they can last, they can be season ones, depending on how bad it is. Syndesmosis isn't a good injury to do. So, fingers crossed for Jack, because by all reports, he's had a really good preseason, been really positive around the footy club, and great to see him back up and firing again after a bit of a rough start to the year last year. Without him, West Coast are certainly he is a massive cog in what they'll be trying to do this year. And I don't know how he gets replaced, to be honest, Skate.
Yeah, well, that's a question because North Melbourne first up away, and obviously the season, as we know, next week starts to really crank up with some of those match sims or practice matches with Port Adelaide and Adelaide coming to town for that 1 week period. So, as a footballer, and it's not saying anything new, but you must absolutely just crave for the moment where you stop training pre-season and you get into some sort of match play against opposition other than your teammates to get even just a slight beat as to how you're tracking.
Yeah, honestly, like Friday just gone would have been probably most clubs would do it. They almost have a meeting and say, right, preseason over. Now we're in season program. I think Friday was the last day of preseason. So to do an injury on that day for Jack, like he would just be spewing as a player, terrible. And yes, you're right. You can't wait to play against other players. You can't wait to do, not be training on the same bloke, or at least I used to anyway, because I used to have to run around behind Josh Kennedy the entire time. So that was never a fun appointment. But yeah, I mean, let's just hope that for West Coast point of view, Jack Darling gets up and about. Now, back on Fremantle, they've had a couple of things go on. The SSP period is still happening right now. So we've seen some sides add to their lists. I'll have that a little later on in the show. But a couple of potential guys they've got for Freo, Sam Stubbs and Liam Sarong. You got any word on how they've been going or who might have the running there?
Well, not so much who's got the running, but Sam Stubbs kicked a couple of goals in some, again, match sim and playing forward. And I've seen him. I haven't seen Liam at all. So all I can point to is that playing for Perth, he looks like a talent. Whether Fremantle are going to pull the trigger this early in the season with that selection, or whether they might wait to the mid-season draft, I guess is the point of conjecture. But yeah, Stubbs has got some form with Perth, and from a local perspective, hopefully he gets an opportunity. Liam, not so sure about. He's obviously got some height on his side that his brother Caleb doesn't, and that's a fantastic story with at least Caleb and his brother, three brothers now having entered the AFL system, which is getting close to a rarity. Between them, Fremantle haven't been too publicly committed, have they, to saying, look, we're going to jump in and definitely take one of these players. So I think it's very line ball as to whether they will go down that path, Scully, before the season starts. I might be proven wrong.
Okay, fair enough. The last one I wanted to cover at Fremantle was the AFLW. Fremantle, they lost Trent Cooper at the end of last year. They've made an appointment. Lisa Webb steps in as the new coach.
Yeah, I think player power's come to the party there. A lot of talk that if she wasn't appointed, there'd be an exodus of sorts, which is interesting given what we've been talking about with the Australian cricket team. But she's popular. She's done it coaching time. She's obviously been a player at the club. So it's a popular appointment. I guess the logistics from her point of view is that she was coaching over in Melbourne at the Bulldogs in the AFLW system. Her husband, Mark, of course, a premiership star with Subiaco, currently the mids coach at the Western Bulldogs men. How that plays out. I think she's a 3-year appointment. I guess there's a bit of uncertainty about the AFLW season. Most think it'll start in August again. And Fremantle, again, the hard part about WA is, and I've spoken to Trent Cooper about this, is trying to recruit players here because you can't obviously offer them the big money that the AFL players get at this point. You've almost have to provide a job as well. So to try and build their list further is going to be tricky for them. And the Eagles have seen that unless you've got some homegrown talent coming through, it's a bit of a grind. But Lisa, I think, very popular with the players, and from their perspective, I'm hoping it works because she's got a task now to build this side up after what was a tricky year or so for Coops. I think he was a bit unlucky given the results he had, but whether he had the best relationship with a couple of people in the club, maybe that was a defining feature in the parting of the ways.
Daniel, I'm just telling you, I've had a free disk space to save local backup data error on my computer, so I'm hoping we don't lose this recording. But we're going to continue on. We've got Dan Conce watching on his safe eyes, and he gives me that thumbs up, Skeet, so we're going to keep going. We're almost done, I think, anyway. Wildcats, are we still in the finals? What's happening?
Gone, Scully, GAWN. As I said to you, they weren't going to win it this year. They just defensively no good, rebounding no good again against Cairns yesterday, and Cairns were missing a couple of their absolute guns. So look, they made is it called the play-ins now? So someone was saying they didn't actually make the playoffs again this year, which would have made it 2 in a row. And of course, Hutchie, if they'd lost that game against Sydney, a week or so ago, would have been run out of town. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
disappointing. There's a bit of work for them to do. Bryce Cotton, outstanding again, but he needs a better support cast. Other players had their moments. Corey Webster at times. Manic, again, intermittently, but I think when you're giving up as many points as the Cats have done this season, they're always going to be up against it to go deep into the playoffs. And you'd have to say, if you're talking long term for this season, next 2 or 3 weeks, the Sydney Kings, who absolutely just dined out on the Wildcats being eliminated, they would be very short price favourites to get into the grand final after their semi final and then go back to back. So, yeah, Wildcats, a bit of work to do because their standing as the best NBL franchise is still there, but their standards have slipped. That's just a given, what we've seen with the results.
Yes, fair enough. The Glory, we've been speaking about them a little bit as well. Macedonia Park, they've had their first loss, unfortunately. They go down 4-2 to Melbourne City on the weekend, Skater.
Yeah, and look, Melbourne City's a great side.
Top of
There
the
was
table, yep.
one moment that I thought, and I wasn't there, that there was a penalty given to the Glory, and they're about to take the spot kick, and the referee comes up and has given this one, and the VAR had overturned the penalty. So some real frustration. Tony
Oh,
Sage
wow.
and all those devotees were spitting chips, I'm sure. But when you get beaten 4-2, look, you probably again have to look defensively at what you did. Adam Taggart came on late, but yeah, look, to be fair, as you know, Scully, in any sport, to try and keep unbeaten runs going, and albeit there are a few draws in there, but you're going to have a slip up, and it happened against one of the championship sides of this season, no question.
Now, I just want to have a run back into the AFL skate because there has been some SSP signings. So these are additional players that have been added to the list in a part of this period of time, which is quite new in the AFL. I think it's a good policy. I think it's a good system to have to, fix any list spots that you might have lost over the preseason or it's not quite working out. And it also gives a bit of a second chance. And I think you'll know a lot of these names. So Adelaide pick up Tyler Brown, I believe of Collingwood. You're nodding your head.
Yes. Yep.
Mark Keane, who, where's he? I know his name, but maybe not. Brisbane pick up Dara Joyce, who was at St Kilda.
The
Connor
Irishman.
McKenna, yes, and Connor McKenna
Mm.
goes to Brisbane, which it's good to see him back. I mean, he was a really good player when he was playing for Essendon.
Yeah, off half back. Yeah, he was
Yeah.
gave him the run, and interesting. He's gone to another club, which is fascinating in itself. So yeah, well, you're right. It's to give these players, whether they've had a year out of the game or they were struggling in the environment they're at, that opportunity. And I guess that's the beauty of. And there's been debate sparked by Paddy Dangerfield about having a mid-season trade. Now, I'm not sure if you're across what he said. I think he was just trying to maybe open up a similar scenario to what happens in the NBA and whether that could be possible in AFL circles. And look, there's two lines of thought. One is the mid-season draft, which effectively takes players out of the waffle and the SANFL. That's in place. That gives players the opportunity to be picked up, but Danger's more talking about the trading of players mid-season. Now, I'm not sure if you've given it much thought, not sure if you care, but it just feels like there's a ever-growing push for us as a footy business to follow the lead of what's happening in the US.
Oh, look, mate. I probably agree with Danger. Do I want it or not want it? I don't. I don't have any strong feelings either way, but it will happen because, as you said, we follow the way of the US. That's what happens over there, and now Danger's saying it, and usually what he says goes in these situations. So, I think we'll probably see that in a pretty short period of time. I mean, given what happens with contracts anyway, some of these things aren't worth the paper that it's written on anyway. So, whether you're getting traded at the end of the year or middle of the year. Maybe it becomes more interesting. Maybe it means teams can make a move in the middle of the year that really changes their season up. Maybe it does get the AFL closer to making sure every team has a chance of winning that premiership. Maybe it does the opposite though. Maybe if you're a good player, your team's just gone through a 12 months of shit, and then the first 12 weeks of the year you don't win a game. You're not going to want to stay there for very long, are you? So that would be the risk, I would say. And, Dan would know a little bit more than probably both you and I do, Skeet, but it's just happened in the NBA. There's been some really big moves happening over there, and it's really good players going to other teams and stacking them with good players. So I don't think most fans would want to see that. Do you?
No, and just on that point, I mean, when Kevin Durant goes from Brooklyn to Phoenix, that's an example. One of the greats of the game, and in an AFL sense, it's a bit like, say, the Eagles are having a shocking season this year, and Geelong's flying, for instance, and they lose a defender. Someone says, "Oh, Cats, why don't we go and ask McGovern, Jeremy, whether he'd like
Yep.
to." Finish off the season, play another year. I don't know. Those, you're right, where the strong teams could actually benefit from that as opposed to evening up the competition. So I think there's a lot to work through before the AFL decides to head down that path.
Oh, I don't know how you fix it either. A couple more names that have changed clubs or have been added to clubs over this period. Oleg Markov goes to Collingwood. He was training at Carlton as a potential
Mm.
replacement of
One day, one
Zach
day there.
Zach Williams, and it was almost like Collingwood thought, you know what, we're going to grab him before they do, and Collingwood sign him. Gold Coast picked Jed Anderson, North Melbourne, of course. I think he can play some really good footy, Jed Anderson. So I think that's a good pickup by Gold Coast. North Melbourne have got Liam Shields. So I think that happened a little while ago now, but he'll be sort of like a player coach type setup, I'd say, under, of course, Alistair Clarkson. St Kilda have picked a couple, one of them being Liam Stocker, if you remember, was involved in that Carlton trade up with Silvani, I think, and he was a part of that, and they traded up to get him. It didn't quite work out for him at Carlton, so he's at St Kilda now, and Western Bulldogs pick up Oscar Baker, who was at another club that I can't think of right now. So,
Melbourne.
yeah, Melbourne, that's right. So, I mean, there are a lot of guys that had, there'll be second chances at second AFL clubs. I think that's doing what it's meant to do. I think that's really good. The last bit of AFL news I got for you, Skeeter, Rory Sloane has stepped down as Adelaide Crows captain, with Jordan Dawson stepping up to be captain. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that his second year at the club, or is it his third?
Yeah, second or third, obviously ex-Sydney, correct?
Mate,
And so
mate, that's
that's a
that's a
huge feather.
mate. To come to a club, not being drafted into it, to be there for 2 or 3 years. I'd love, Dan, if you had a browser with there and you could show me some fingers. If it's Jordan, I reckon it's his second year. Maybe I'm completely wrong here, but
And he kicked a win. I think he kicked the match winner
yep.
late against Porto. He certainly, but you're right, to have that impact around the club after a short period of time, it says something about the character of the bloke. And obviously, we don't know much about him, but that's an interesting move with Rory stepping down. A little bit similar to Nat. He's been in the position for a fair while, and he's had some injuries himself, hasn't he? And he's a super player, so maybe he just wants to concentrate on footy. He's got a young family, and this is his second year.
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow.
Mate, that's incredible. That is really incredible. So that speaks volumes of his leadership. But I would say less about, everyone wants to throw, he must be a good leader, right? Of course he is. He's a captain, but he must have great ability to connect with people, like to be at a football club for 12 months and then captain the team. Unless I'm sure it is Jordan Dawson, right? This isn't a furphy. Like this is real, isn't it?
Well, I
Yes.
saw something online saying that Adelaide have got a decision to make, but I thought, well, Scully's obviously on the ball. He's got this sorted. So we'll just double check that as I look through my browser myself to make sure that he is captain. If he's not, we can lock complete tools.
Wow, that wouldn't be a first on this show before, Skater. I tell you what. Yeah, but mate, I think we will see some trades. I think there's a couple more captaincies to be. There's a couple more captains to come out as well. I don't think Geelong's named a captain yet, and Fremantle definitely hasn't. So that's an interesting space to watch over the next couple of weeks as well. But that probably finishes us off here, I reckon, Skater, on the Shelter FootyCast. We've done a remote session. We've done it very well. I think we've got it right. I think it is Jordan Dawson is the captain of the footy club. Yeah, very good.
Absolutely.
So, well done, Jordan. Hats off to you. Mate, I'm glad that your voice has handled itself better than mine over the weekend. I'm going to need a little bit of rest before Thursday to cover myself off. What are you giving me biceps for? What are you strong about?
I'm strong about the outdoor summer sour, which I've sent you the video. I've done the promo. I had one of those before I went to the concert on Saturday. I had a few Saturday night, and then I've just listened to you. Rang you yesterday. Both Dan and I touched base with you about 4:00, and you were flying, baby. You were up and about.
I'd had a couple of sours. I was actually with Michael Thompson's sons, so I was drafted with James. I was with Sam and Dave, and they both said to say a big hello, Skeeter. They were as happy seeing Skeeter's number come up on my phone as it would be if the Queen had rung me, and she's not with us anymore. God rest her soul. Thank you very much, Skeet. Been a pleasure, mate. Shelter FootyCast on Instagram. You go and get a bit of kip after a big Super Bowl morning, mate. If you want to send us an email, footycast@shelterbrewing.com.au. Do remember, if you listen to this, wherever you listen to your podcasts, go and jump on, subscribe to the Shelter FootyCast feed. We'll be with you on Thursday. See you, Skeeter.
See you, boys. Have a good one.